This channel has a lot of different formats that have little to nothing in common, and it's probably a terrible idea to add a new one to further muddy the waters is not what went through my head today. So welcome to this thing, where I talk about different RPG classes in a sort of system agnostic and also hopefully somewhat genre agnostic type context. This isn't about a specific kind of platform or game system, so it is mostly for tabletop gaming, but the thing that you should take away from that is drop all your mechanical preconceptions about what these classes are supposed to be and how they're supposed to work. Today we will be talking about nature and its magic, and the three classes most associated with that, which is the Druid, the Shaman, and the Witch. Another thing that I want you to divorce yourself from is your cultural preconceptions about any of these things and what they're supposed to be. I realize that historically Druids can be classified as a type of shaman, except they were active in Europe, and I know witches have that whole persecution and burning at the stake thing for the Christian church and all that, which didn't even happen in the medieval period at all. That was all modernity. Quit having those. Don't have them anymore. This is for play in secondary worlds where the cultural associations of our world don't exist. They're just sort of inspirations. They're very much abstracted they're just words that want to describe a thing that doesn't really exist in our world. Also, as a bonus, when I'm through with doing something to all three of these, I will sort of subvert them and put them on their heads. I think that was all the caveats. Let's get started. Oh yeah, there is one more thing. Obviously, these are all just my opinions. This is how I like things to be. This is how I interpret things to be. And if you don't want to do it like this, don't. I like Druids, and so do a lot of other people. They're one of the most common classes that occur across a variety of different systems. They're not just tree wizards, they're not just boys and girls from the Magic Academy who learned a bunch of spells that can make plants grow faster. Druids are incarnations of their environment. They're intertwined deeply with the nature and place that they are from. So I find it very difficult for them as a class to be adventurers, but on the other hand, it's very easy to make them adventurers. I've always felt that the idea of the Druid as just someone who communes with nature to be a little too simplistic, because nature is fucking huge. We mostly associate it with forests, but there are so many different environments that are just filled to the brim with nature. You have your marshes, you have your coastlines, you have your deserts, you have your open oceans, you have your underground mushroom cave systems. There's life in all of these places, and there should be druids for all of these places. Druids should be just as varied as natural environments are, not just people who feel at home wherever there's a plant. The places that they are bound to should immediately define their very personalities, because a druid of the swamp also kind of is that swamp. A druid of the glaciers should be quiet and lacking of a sense of time. A druid of a volcanic island should sort of carry a rage inside them that could erupt at any moment. A druid of the desert should be enduring and never afraid of change. This could go so far that your druid could have a whole different conception of what life means. A druid of the radioactive wastelands should welcome mutations and cancerous death, because that is the kind of thing that is inherent to their environment. And I don't probably have to say this, but obviously their magic should reflect their environment. No tree-growing desert druids. Not gonna happen. This is also the thing that makes it difficult for me to see druids as a class that does a lot of adventuring. They're just not inherently wanderers. I mean, sure, the druid of a vast forest might travel all the time. They might never sleep in the same spot twice, hanging out in the trees, living a completely nomadic lifestyle within the confines of that forest. But they're part of that forest. They're not just gonna leave to get riches from dragons. It's their job to be there. It's their obligation, their life's mission to tend and protect the land. Really, it's their ikigai. But ironically, that is also the thing that will make them very likely to go on quests, which, playing an RPG, going on quests is sort of the thing that you would want to do. Think about it. If you're a druid, you have an inbuilt motivation. You have something that you care about deeply. You have something that will make you go out into the world and achieve goals. Maybe your environment is being threatened by an outside force. and the only way of stopping that from happening is by going with the other adventurers outside of your environment. Maybe your environment is one that spreads and invades other environments, then you'd be out of it all the time to sow the seeds. Or speaking of seeds, maybe you have the seeds of your environment that was destroyed, and you're trying to rebuild it somewhere else. I don't see a lot of Druids engaging in a life of nomadic adventuring, but I can definitely see a lot of adventure being in the life of a Druid. Before we move on, let's talk about shapeshifting. Shapeshifting seems to be one of those things that is just super prevalent in all kinds of Druid versions, and I like it. I mean, if you're literally the environment incarnate, and you're a powerful magical being, it makes sense for you to be able to transform into aspects of that very environment. Obviously, I would limit the creatures that a druid can transform into to the creatures that are native to that druid's environment. I'm not gonna have a savannah druid transforming into a polar bear. That just doesn't make sense. Think about this though. We always have this idea of druids being people with some sort of magical talent, or maybe not, who go into this environment or who grew up in this certain specific environment, and then they adopt parts of that environment and the animalistic aspects of it as they become a druid of the place. But considering all the shapeshifting that's going on, why have people involved in the first place? What if the druid isn't a sapient being that became animalistic? What if it was an animal that was transformed into a sapient being? Like, for instance, the spirits of the tundra need someone to protect their environment. So they hit up some random moose and go, "Hey, my dude, how's the antlers?" And then before the moose goes into this whole thing about how he feels like he's throwing his life away and how the wife no longer loves him and how his kids resent him, the spirits go, "Yeah, listen, here's the thing. Do you want to be an elf? Like, actually transform into an elf. You could still transform into a moose whenever you want, and also into a seal, or a fox, or just a stone. Also, we have a great dental plan. And then whoosh! There is now a druid." That's just something to consider. Ah yes, shamans. The class that usually is just another word for druid in systems that want to be like D&D, but don't want to be too obvious about it. I think there's a very important distinction that can be made between druids and shamans. Druids are agents of their environment that commune with outsiders, specifically civilization. Shamans, on the other hand, are agents of civilization that commune with the spirits of nature. Because to me, that's what a shaman is. A person who can communicate and harness the power of spirits. And that also introduces a sort of clerical element to the shaman that the druid just doesn't have, because while the druid may live on the fringes of a town, they'll always sort of be a bit of a recluse that is more interested in nature, but the shaman may very well be a central figure in that town's social hierarchy. They could have a temple where they acted sort of like a priest in addition to their spirit communicating duties, because let's be honest, what is a cleric if not a shaman who communicates with spirits on a different plane? That is the essence of the shaman. They are a diplomat between the mundane and the supernatural world of spirits. They exist in both at the same time. And of course, if you have a shaman that exists in a given community, they would probably mostly interact with the environmental spirits that surround that community, similar to a druid. But unlike the druids, they as persons and their personalities could be very much detached from that. And of course, there would be a greater layer of abstraction. There would be more symbolism, more ritualism, that kind of thing. In nature, and thus to a druid, an otter is just an otter. But to a shaman, the otter, and thus the spirit of the otter, is whatever that spirit represents in the culture the shaman is from. There will be industriousness, territoriality, building of structures in nature. Those are the kinds of things that the shaman would call upon the otter for. This is a complete aside. I once hit an otter with a paddle accidentally. It was something in the water, and then it just bobbed up and it looked at me like, "What the fuck did you just do, you fucking asshole?" And then it swam away. That's just something that happened. A shaman may work with totems and other charms and fetishes that represent the idea of those spirits, and thus contact those spirits directly in their sort of ritualistic methods of communicating with them, which might be more than just talking, but also might involve like song and dance and all that. They don't talk to the individual bear like a druid would, they communicate with the spirit of bear. All that being said, the idea of mentor spirits is one that I was introduced to via Shadowrun, and I very much like it. So while any given shaman might communicate with a bunch of different spirits, they could have a specific connection with one spirit that maybe they share some sort of personality traits with or something. A lion shaman might be majestic and dominant in their social role. A mammoth shaman could be slow but implacable and also hairy. A willow shaman might be steadfast and comforting. A dolphin shaman might be a born traveler, always happy and playful. Also probably a rapist. Seriously, dolphins are assholes. This could also work with the negative aspects of a creature. A fly shaman might be someone who is putrid and disgusting. A maggot shaman might take the role of an undertaker in some specific culture. But because of the conceptual nature of how the shaman communicates with spirits, it needn't always be so naturalistic. Elemental shamans are also a very common trope in many game systems. Your mentor spirit might just be fire, or some other primary element, or non-primary element, like, I don't know, ice or sand. Another interesting idea that I personally have found to be a little bit impractical is seasonal shamans, like spring shamans and summer shamans and like autumn shamans, winter shamans. Problem is, you'd be out of work for most of the year and you'd have to get a day job like Santa Claus. And if you did have like a shaman that changes in its powers over the year, then you probably like mechanically would have just 4 different characters there. And that would be a hassle. I mean, it depends on your system, but really at the end of the day, you would have 4 different builds if you wanted to play this seriously. Where druids are the magic of their environment and shamans can draw from the magic of their environment, witches understand the magic of their environment. They're much more like traditional spellcasters, using magic as a tool and learning about it in a much more academic context. They don't need to call upon some spirit to make a spell work, unless that is how the spell works, in which case probably it's not going to be the kind of spell where you ask nicely. And also, just to make this clear, for me, witches in like fantasy settings are not these evil demon-pacting people, women. They don't even have to be women. Like a male witch is still a fucking witch. They don't have to be good. They can be evil. They can do fucked up shit. But really, for me, they're nature wizards. Witches brew potions based on their understanding of alchemy and herbalism. They have knowledge about sort of medicine and hermetic magic. They may prefer and be experts in a certain environment, maybe even a certain place, but if they want to or have to, they will move. And they will sometimes get ingredients from very far away because something that does the thing that they want to be done doesn't grow where they live right now. A witch's hut is a lot like a wizard's tower. They have libraries of books and stores of all kinds of components for spells that you need, maybe summoning circles, that kind of thing. But where a wizard might study some alien magic of the arcane plane or just like the theoretical fundamentals of magic that can be adapted to anything, a witch studies the magic of the land. In a lot of settings, they will live on the fringes of civilization, making a living using their skills. They might cure people of ailments when they come to them. They might make potions for, like, love, or maybe also poisons. According to incels, that's the same thing. Or they might make money as like a guide for adventurers when they go through the land that they have gained an understanding of. Often they will be seen as vestiges of past savagery, and their magic will just not be as accepted as the fancy academic magic of the wizards. Maybe they even suffer from persecution by organized organizations of organized clerics, but that doesn't have to be the case. And it is this precise lack of organization that sets them apart from other spellcasters. They'll have their covens. Maybe there's like a bunch of witches in the vicinity of the same city and they hang out in the tavern every Saturday. But most of the time, the way covens work is you have these huge assemblies that maybe like every 5 years all the witches of the continent hang out somewhere. But mostly witches will keep to themselves and maybe, you know, train another witch or two, which will then inherit a part of their knowledge. Most of this organization is of course due to prejudice. I mean, they are witches getting together to do witchy witch things. That is scary, and nobody trusts that. And so as to not draw attention to themselves, they just don't do it, or they do it secretly and ineffectively. In my settings, this will often just be the product of prejudice, but that prejudice will not be entirely unwarranted. Being wizards of nature, they will often play by the rules of nature, and those can be very opportunistic. You may have a witch with the best of intentions, you know, she wants to help cure a whole village, and she might deal with a vampire in order to get that done. Ironically, their lack of organization is the thing that deletes many of the social mechanisms by which we and, you know, wizards in their wizard towers keep themselves from going AWOL with the morals. Even if they are accepted by their community, their sheer knowledge in magical powers will set them apart, most often above the people around them. And even if they wanted to, they couldn't talk to anyone about their work because nobody understands it. Whereas wizards, who are always in brilliant contact, will just hang out in the academy cafeteria and discuss their latest experiments. And that isn't even considering that as magic users, if that works that way in your setting, they will grow very, very old while all the mortals around them just die all the time. It's not surprising then that if they are so deep into their studies, and with all the isolation from the world and with all the prejudice that people might have, many witches could lose their moral compass, and then eventually they bake children that walk into their forest because they don't know that that's wrong. As far as power levels go, I think witches should just be able to do minor things on the spot. Anything above that would require some sort of component which they may carry at their person at all times, or, you know, ritualism, but really when they get onto it and they do like a complex spell, witches can pull off some powerful stuff. Oh, and also if I were a witch, I would totally get a broomstick and then fly it ironically. So I told you that when I was done talking about these classes, I would do something that would turn them on their heads. And that is what is about to happen now. We talk druids, shamans, and witches in terms of the natural world, but what about urban environments? Cities are full of life. I don't see why a sprawling metropolis shouldn't get to have an avatar that is a druid. I mean, obviously there wouldn't be some like green bearded old man with a staff and like an owl on their shoulder, but possibly a vagrant, beard not green, and there's a tomcat just running behind them all the time. The druid might be an avatar of the city's central park, where, you know, he'd look a lot more like a traditional druid, but like more orderly, because parks are more orderly. They could be a druid of the docks district, with like seashells in their face and kelp in their hair, and maybe they help people when they drown or something. As for shamans, there would be spirits galore in cities. For animal spirits, you'd have like pigeons and rats. For material spirits, you'd have bricks and iron, possibly concrete. As for conceptual spirits, you'd have spirits of commerce or spirits of the hearth. But that is once again where the line gets blurry between the shaman and the cleric, doesn't it? Witches in cities would have access to all kinds of ingredients and there would be no shortage of customers. They'd still be different from the wizards in their fancy towers because their eyes would be on the streets, not the skies. Who knows what strange herbs might grow on the side of the road and what powerful reagents can be found in the sewers. In our current modern day world, there are city witches. I mean, that's mostly like a religious thing. For some people, it's an aesthetic thing. I don't see why it shouldn't be adapted into fiction. It has been adapted into fiction. It works very well. Just imagine what you could do with a druid of the skate park, or a shaman of the Wi-Fi spirit, space druid, asteroids, shaman of the void. I could go on. Thank you very much for watching. Do all the things you would do with the video, with the liking and the subscribing and the commentaring. Share this to relevant communities. Do not spam relevant communities with this. That will be very bad. Neo has done a thing on the Discord server, and it's like he wants to donate, he wants to match your donations for the month of November. But like right now, I only have like no more live streams for the entire month, so you'd have to do it over PayPal. And then you could contact him if you did that, and then he would insult me on Christmas. That is his idea. It's not my idea, I'm just letting you know. Remember to switch your Maker Support to Patreon because Maker Support no longer exists, and also look into maybe if they're billing you, which shouldn't happen, but maybe it does. In that spirit, feel free to just play any RPG class that you like. Maybe consider some of this. This is something I put at least 5 seconds of thought into. And see you around, cunts.